Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of United Talks podcast. It's been an interesting couple of days with the international break, coming pretty much to an end, basically by tomorrow, I believe. Today's Tuesday, so maybe the last round of games on international break will come to an end, and players will return back to their clubs. Now, you're welcome back to another deep dive, United Talks podcast, and this is kind of tagged the fan reaction show or the reaction show. But we are trying to gain some understanding and context with regards to Man United's plan to sign Sandro Tonali. My question now revolves around why should Man United go for Tonali? Why Tonali? Basically, I just watched Bosnia and Italy play in the basically the qualifying World Cup qualifying final for their group. And I specifically watched that, especially because of Tonali. The reason for that is because I wanted to get a sense of the kind of player that he is and how he fits into Manchester United. But also, I did my own research with regards to what I thought about Sandro Tonali and how he affects the team and what he brings to the team. I'm trying to compare him to, midfielders around the world, midfielders of his ilk, his age, his capability, and all of that. So I came up with a structured deep dive into Sandro Tonali as a whole. Now, the question is, have you ever watched a football game, a football match that felt like the game was simply happening to your team rather than your team dictating the game? Now, for Manchester United fans, this feeling has been all too familiar, over the past few seasons. We have seen moments of individual brilliance, chaotic comebacks, and basically the stunning counterattacks. But the true suffocating control, right? Basically, have you ever watched a game where you're losing control of the game and they're suffocating you? I mean, that has been the missing piece of the puzzle. And today, we're basically looking at the solution to the exact problem. We're breaking down why Sandro Tonali is the missing engine, the tactical bridge, and the ultimate modernization of the Manchester United midfield. We are also going to look at the numbers, the tactical setups, and exactly how he transforms this 4-2-3-1 system as we prepare for life after Casemiro. Obviously, we're looking to replace Casemiro at the end of the season, but then how do we truly understand the kind of midfielders that we need to sign? Mine are linked to Sandro Tonali and Elliot Anderson, but how do we know the archetype of the midfielder that we need for this team to thrive, right? Now, to truly understand what Tonali brings to a football pitch, first we need to kind of define what midfield control actually looks like or really looks like in the modern game. And there's no other person to look at when it comes to midfield control than Vitinha, right? In the modern game, if you look across Europe's elite clubs, there are two distinctively different philosophies of midfield control right now. To illustrate this, we have to compare Sandro Tonali to this world-class midfielder that represents the opposite end of the spectrum, Paris Saint-Germain's Vitinha. And I had to look at it. Somebody who is more in control and another person who is more of a driver of the team. But can I match those two players together to form one, unique box-to-box player, ball-playing player, as well as an engine, right? So we're looking at PSG's Vitinha. Now, we'll talk about Vitinha for a bit before we now link it up to Sandro Tonali and then bring it back to Vitinha and then, kind of summarize everything at the end, right? Now, to truly understand that, let's talk about Vitinha. Vitinha is what we call that tempo dictator. And the idea is this. I don't want to come out and tell you guys, register, trequartista, this and that. No. Under Luis Enrique's fluid PSG 2.0 system, Vitinha is that absolute heartbeat. He's the dictator of the game. He dictates the tempo. He dictates direction. He dictates the speed of the game. He controls games through this technical, retention. He operates in the tightest of spaces, basically, the tightest of spaces imaginable, using his low center of gravity and his press resistance to actually exploit numerical superiority. We watched that a lot against Chelsea, and if you look at the underlying metrics over the past year, Vitinha consistently ranks in the 95th percentile or higher for progressive passes and pass completion in the opponent's half. But he does this through constant mobility, composure under extreme pressure, and short, sharp passing, basically intricate passes. Now, he does not determine your, he does not dominate your team physically, right? Physicality is not his game, but he dominates you with geometry and timing. Now, he defends by ensuring that his teams simply never lose the ball in dangerous areas. And that's a fact. Now, Sandro Tonali, basically a different end of the spectrum, but I'm trying to marry them together. Sandro Tonali is an entirely different beast. Tonali is a dynamic engine, and he is the quintessential modern number 6 and number 8, so basically a hybrid midfielder. Where Vitinha controls the game with a special, with a scalpel, basically like a doctor doing his job, doing a surgery in the game, Tonali controls it with a sledgehammer. That is like the hard worker, right? He runs across the pitch, covers the ground. Now he's highly mobile. He's a highly mobile ball winner. He thrives on physicality and physical intensity, right? He covers massive ground routinely, clocking over 11 kilometers per game. And he launches play with long-range progressive passes. I was looking at the Bosnia versus Italy, and I saw how Sandro Tonali had a lot of recoveries. He had a lot of recovery pace and all of that. But then I brought you some stats yesterday when I talked about Sandro Tonali and his defensive contribution, and ranked compared to other midfielders. Sandro Tonali has 24% defensive contribution. That means like in every 100 games, he basically would have. So let's look at this. So if we look at 24% defensive contribution, count 100 games. That is every 4 games he has 1 defensive contribution or less than 1. Yeah, that's tough, right? Or let's say per 90, 24% per 90. So every 4 minutes he has 1 defensive contribution. So what? No. Per 90. So in the entire 90 minutes, he has 1/4 defensive contribution. That's tough. Anyway, let's not basically break it down. But then he does his own type of control in a different way because he's a hybrid midfielder, right? Now, because he controls games with a sledgehammer, he's a highly mobile ball winner who thrives on physical intensity. He covers massive ground. And then he clocks over 11 kilometers per game, and he launches play with his long-range progressive passing. Now, Tonali also, controls games through aggression, transition stopping, and sheer verticality, right? Now, he wins the ball. He does not look for the safe 5-yard pass to reset the shape. He looks up and he drives. Now, this brings us to the most pressing issue for Manchester United. That is replacing Casemiro in that 4-2-3-1 system. With Casemiro's time at the base of the midfield drawing to a natural conclusion following the 25-26 campaign, United are not looking for a new player. They are looking for a tactical evolution. And Casemiro at his absolute peak was that classic destroyer, that guy that does a whole lot of work intercepting and screening the defense, right? He anchored the midfield, won his tackles, and provided an impenetrable shield for the back four. But as the Premier League has kind of grown faster and more transition heavy, the traditional static destroyer has become a liability. Now you need a player who can actually win the ball and instantly become the first attacker. And that is the kind of player that Sandro Tonali is. Tonali is arguably the most logical replacement to slot directly into into that current double pivot of Man United. He modernizes the role completely. Tonali provides the necessary aggression when it comes to ball winning that is required to kind of shield the Premier League backline, averaging around 2.5 tackles and 1.5 interceptions per 90 minutes. But crucially, he is significantly superior when it comes to the engine. He has a significantly superior engine to press high and recover instantly. I watched that game against Bosnia and Herzegovina. You know, you're only as good as your last game. And I saw Sandro Tonali's recovery from the back, from the forward line. He pushed forward and his running back was absolutely amazing, right? He had pace, he had energy, he had power. But then I think he tires out at the 75th minute and then he just kind of peters out and you have to kind of compliment him one way or another. Now, when Tonali steps up to press, he recovers pace. His recovery pace allows him to get back in quickly in time. Now, he offers the defensive steel United desperately needs, but he also upgrades the team's ability to transition smoothly from defense to attack, which is what Man United actually needs. But a lot of people are now asking, does Sandro Tonali fit into a deep line playmaker role? I look at the back three, I look at the three midfielders, and I look at putting Sandro Tonali in there. And I absolutely see a lot of lapses and a lot of gaps. Now, for Man United, because we talk about, Kobbie Mainoo, signing a player that works well, Kobbie Mainoo and all of that, I've been on a lot of live streams and I've been kind of shocked by, Man United fans and their thoughts on this whole Kobbie Mainoo situation and wanting a player to complement him. Now, the question that people are asking is with regards to him being able to play that deep line playmaking role. And I've said this time and again that I think that, the midfielder will need to change his way or his profile or his style of play or even kind of adjust it or tweak it a little bit to be able to fit into the role that it is demanded of a deep line playmaker. The short answer to that question, as I said, can Sandro Tonali play in that deep line playmaker role, is yes, he can do that perfectly. He's 25, he's still got, he still hasn't hit that peak yet. But we need to also rethink that deep line playmaker in this context, right? Tonali is not a static, metronome like Sergio Busquets. He is a vertical dictator, right? Dictator, rather. He's highly effective at dropping deep during the first phase of build-up, but you will also often see him slotting in between the centre backs or pulling out wide to form a temporary back three. I've seen that, and I saw that in that Italy game as well. Now, this actually creates that overload to assist with the build-up play. He gets the ball and he finds a certain Kobbie Mainoo if he's played in that team. And we'll talk about this, the pictorial evidence of kind of like imaginative evidence of how he fits into Manchester United and all of that much later down this video. But basically, when he receives the ball under pressure, rather than just kind of accumulating sideways passing and sideways possession to kind of pad his passing stats, he immediately looks to break. Excuse me. He immediately looks to dictate the game through the speed of transition and his progressive carrying. He averages over like 6 progressive passing and 2.5 progressive carries per 90. So 6 progressive passes and 2.5 progressive carries per 90. Now, he wants to hurt the opponent the second the ball is turned over. That's Sandro Tonali for you. And it gives you that kind of vibe of a certain Bruno Fernandes. I've seen that likeness and all of that. But this aggression, vertical style, and vital question, this aggression and vertical style raises a vital question about the defensive work that Sandro Tonali would bring to this team. Now, the question that I have asked, I don't know about most fans, but I have asked this: does Sandro Tonali need a defensive partner to flourish, or can he do the job himself? Now, based on my research, the answer is nuanced. Because we talk about, okay, can he complement Kobbie Mainoo? Which means if Kobbie Mainoo is the number 8, then Sandro Tonali can be the number 6. But he's also a 6 and an 8. But his primary position is central midfield. So, yeah, make of it what you will. The answer, as I said again, is nuanced. Tonali is defensively robust enough to win his own duels. He engages in relentless man-to-man marking across the pitch, but he's also a physical powerhouse. However, because his natural instinct is to carry the ball forward and crash the opposition box, he absolutely requires a structured rest defense behind him so that he's not, caught out in transition. And that is what happens, especially at Newcastle. If you want to understand what happens with Tonali, just have a look at Newcastle and you get a sense of an understanding of actually what happens. Now, bringing Vitinha back into the fray, back into the conversation to highlight this, at PSG, Vitinha's defensive work relies heavily on a mobile collective system, a highly mobile collective system, right? The forwards actually drop back into the mid, then the fullbacks actually tuck into the midfield, and then they create overloads, right? So imagine this: the forwards drop, you have your Dembele, your Bakola, and your Desiree Doué. They drop into mid, or even Kvaratskhelia drop into mid. They press all together, right? They're moving like a moving engine, and then João Neves and Vitinha and maybe Ruiz or Zaire Emery, Warren Zaire Emery would drop deeper again, and then the fullbacks, Hakimi and Nuno Mendes tuck into mid, and you have just a two at the back, right, of Marquinhos and this other Pacho, right? Now, Vitinha's defensive metrics are heavily skewed, right? Now, the forwards actually, like I said, drop in, the fullbacks tuck into the midfield, and they create kind of overloads in different areas of the midfield. Vitinha's defensive metrics are heavily skewed, and the reason is because they are skewed towards a tactical position and interceptions rather than, raw tackling. But Tonali, conversely, defends through sheer physical exertion and proactive, aggressive interventions. We've seen that multiple times where he's shown it. Now, the next question will be, can Tonali perfect his style at United? Well, absolutely. He is proactive. He has a physical nature, and his physical nature is far more suited to that chaotic, heavy metal transition nature of the Premier League. Now, rather than Vitinha's ball retention and retention heavy profile would do in a double pivot, in that same double pivot, Sandro Tonali would be that energetic guy that increases the pace of the game. Now, in England, you have to win the physical battle before you can win the tactical one or the technical one. Tonali guarantees you a win when it comes to the physical battle. Now, let's look at the mouth-watering prospect of the midfield trio. In as much as I want to talk about how Tonali fits into Man United, we have to look at the potential. Let's say, for example, Bruno stays, and then Kobbie-Mainoo is thriving. You have Kobbie, Tonali, and Bruno Fernandes. Now, if deployed together, the efficiency and the balance of the midfield would be nothing short of exceptional. In my research, I was looking around and I was trying to find out some tactical analysis, and I asked the question. I was like, okay, how efficient will it be to have a Sandro Tonali, a Bruno Fernandes, and a Kobbie-Mainoo? And well, the answers I found were kind of like, he's going to be exceptional. Now, you picture a pitch divided into different zones, and at the base is operating as a number 6, and that person you have is Sandro Tonali in the base of that mid. And then he provides that defensive anchor, the physical intensity, the long range distribution from deep, and he's also the safety net and the launch pad of the team. Then, slightly ahead of him, basically on the right side or on the left side of this side, slightly ahead of him is the number 8 in Kobbie-Mainoo. Mainoo offers that elite press resistance. His tight space dribbling is phenomenal, and he acts as the ultimate connector, who should be acting as the ultimate connector, linking the play through the middle thirds of the pitch. And Mainoo can also take the ball on the half turn with a man on his back and glide out of trouble. And we've seen him super press resistant and all. Then you have someone operating at the tip. So you have your Bruno Fernandes, Kobbie-Mainoo, and Sandro Tonali at the bottom. Someone operating at the tip as the number 10 in Bruno Fernandes. By having Tonali to launch the play and Mainoo to carry it through the press, Bruno is entirely freed from his deeper build-up responsibilities. And we all know Bruno is at his most devastating when he's allowed to focus entirely on high-risk, high-reward chance creation in the final third. Now, if Manchester United signs Sandro Tonali, primarily his position would now be either the right-sided or left-sided of part of the pivot. So either the right-sided or left-sided pivot in that 4-2-3-1 setup. Out of possession, he would operate in the most defensively responsible as the most defensively responsible midfielder, tracking runners and snapping into tackles. In possession, he will maintain the license to step up, break the counter press, carry the ball during the offensive phases. He is a runner. He's a beast when it comes to running. He can drive the ball forward. Now, basically, he can absolutely control the midfield in games. But as we've established, he does it with controlled aggression. Now, instead of slowing the game down to a walking pace to kill the crowd, he dictates the tempo by winning the ball quickly and sustaining pressure at the edge of the opponent's box. Now, he also instantly launches progressive sequences. He creates a relentless wave of attacks. Now, signing a player like Sandro Tonali's profile means that the team around him must adapt. It's not that we have to sign a player to adapt to the team, but the team around him must also adapt. Now, to fully accommodate Tonali, remember I brought in Vitinha and how the team around him adapts to how he plays to be able to deal with that defensive gap that is needed, right? For Man United to fully accommodate Sandro Tonali and to allow him maximize his phenomenal box-to-box engine without exposing the defense, United would need to implement a specific tactical structure or some other specific tactical structures, to be able to let him adapt. First, we need to use inverted fullbacks, and that is a non-negotiable. Like, the truth is, if we have to sign one more or two more fullbacks, they have to also learn to invert, right? When Tonali drives forward with the ball, he empties the space behind him. I mean, that sounds very, very familiar. Having a fullback that tucks into the central midfield alongside the remaining pivot player in the possession provides immediate cover for the vacated space. We only have to look across the city to see how vital this is, especially with Manchester City. Now, when Manchester City signed Ryan Aït-Nouri in the summer of 2025, they utilized his elite technical ability to invert from the left flank, creating an impenetrable midfield overload that protected the central players when they bombarded forward. You also look at a situation where they're playing John Stones and Diaz at the back. John Stones is that guy in the center, in that back four, is that guy that tucks into midfield and creates a double pivot with Rodri. We've seen that several times. Pep Guardiola changed it and evolved it over time. Right. Now, United must adopt a similar tactical framework, just as I mentioned, either John Stones or Ryan Aït-Nouri. You cannot have Tonali breaking into the final third if your fullbacks are overlapping into the wide areas or out wide and leaving your centre backs exposed to a 2-on-2 counter attack or 3-on-2 or 4-on-2, depending on how the team is trying to attack Manchester United. Secondly, United would benefit massively from a highly mobile centre back. And that is very key for us to be able to make that happen. You look at Newcastle, you see Malik Thiaw, you see the other centre back, the left side footed centre back. He's highly mobile, right? Now, you need a defender who is comfortable stepping up into the midfield line to sweep up loose balls. Like I said, John Stones does it very well for Manchester City. This helps maintain a high defensive line and heavily compress the space that Tonali would leave or would have to police. Now, if the defensive line drops deep while Tonali presses high, the midfield becomes so stretched that even a player with his engine will get overrun. So you see that in as much as we want to talk about all of these positives, we have to also mention some of the lapses within the game. So what is the realistic potential of Sandro Tonali fitting into this Manchester United side? That's a very huge question. The potential is incredibly high, and that's what we have to just agree. At 25 years old, Tonali is entering the absolute prime of his career. He's already, a possession. He's already a possession kind of player, and he already possesses a vital Premier League experience that Manchester United always need. Meaning that there is no tactical or physical adaptation period required. He has the physical profile to handle the grueling Premier League winter schedule and the tactical flexibility to be the absolute cornerstone of United's midfield rebuild. Bringing Sandro Tonali into the squad is not just the upgrading of a single position. It's not about just upgrading a single position. It's about elevating the entire tactical setup. We have always lacked midfielders. We have always had a lot of space in midfield. Now he offers the exact blend of defensive skill and then technical progression needed to finally allow Manchester United to dictate football matches on their own terms. He also protects the backline. He unleashes Kobe-Mainoo and provides the ammunition for Bruno Fernandes. Now, he is that engine room and the architect that United, that Old Trafford has been waiting for. The truth is, we can go on and on talking about, all of the positives of having Sandro Tonali at this team, in this team, and having Sandro Tonali at Old Trafford. But we will be doing ourselves a disservice if we don't talk about the lapses, right? And I will keep saying this. Whether we sign Sandro Tonali or not, we need a defensive midfielder. We need at least one defensive midfielder. A lot of people might say, oh, why don't we just go get Carlos Baleba? He's not cheap, but we need a defensive midfielder. And for us to be able to benefit more from Sandro Tonali, benefit more and utilize his gifts and his talents, then we need to sign him a defensive midfielder. You look at Newcastle, they're a well-oiled engine when all three central midfielders are fit. You have Joe Linton, who used to be a striker before. Whoever remembers will know. Joe Linton used to be a striker before. You have Joe Linton, you have Sandro Tonali, and then you have Bruno Guimaraes. All of them support each other, help each other to, defend as a team. Then in that same PSG, you also have that I compared. You have João Neves, you have Vitinha, and you have Ruiz or Warren Zaire-Emery. Now these three players, they are a well-oiled engine and they work together. If Vitinha is up, João Neves or Warren Zaire-Emery or even Ruiz will drop, right? And they always attack at the same time and defend at the same time. Not saying that there's not opportunities where there'll be space left behind when they attack, but then you have to actually look at the facts and basically, assess the facts and get yourself some understanding. But it is what it is. Let me know your thoughts and feelings in the comment section about this whole Sandro Tonali thing. I had to just do this deep dive to kind of give you a sense of an understanding. And these are the kind of videos that, most people don't really, want to go deep into, especially, but you see like some other top creators actually do stuff like this. And for me, I had to do this because I felt like we need to talk about him because the whole news around him is basically serious. Then when Man United go ahead to sign him, we'll now do a proper player profile of what Tonali brings and who Tonali is as the archetype of player. This time around, we just only described what he brings to Man United and what kind of player he is and why Man United are wanting to sign him. Anyway, let me know thoughts and feelings in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing. And thank you to all of you, the new subscribers who helped us get to 3,600. We are still growing as a community and long may it continue. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for liking, sharing, and subscribing. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Goodbye and God bless.